My name is Eileen Baumgart, formerly Swanson. I am the only child left of Elmer and Mabel Swanson, and I'd like to give you a little piece of information of my parents. They're foregrown. Okay, on my father's side, his mother's name was Mary Sandine, and he was born in St. Peter, Minnesota. And his father was a man by the name of Edgar. Nobody knew who he was. He ran away with the housekeeper when my dad was a baby. He never saw him after that. He never come back into his life at all. His mother, Mary Sandine, married a gentleman from Sweden by the name of Swenson. He legally adopted my father, and they had 5 other children: Frank, Oscar, Mabel, Agnes, and Clarence. On my mother's side, her mother's name was Mary Anderson, was born in Houston. And she had several brothers. I don't know all of them, but they were Randy, Anton, and I don't know how many more. Her husband's name was John Ketchell. He was born around West Bend, Wisconsin. And we never knew much about his family. I knew he had a brother George and a sister Tilly. And I know the sister Tilly was a problem. The 2 brothers had her put in the reform school because she was so wild. Okay, Mom and Pa married in the middle of June 1911. Jean was born exactly a year later, June 17, 1912. They lived at 1705 Louvain Street, and Pa was a fireman in the Burlington. My dad and mother did when he was, I don't know what this is. My dad's mother died when he was 12. And he stayed on the farm with his stepfather, and he said he would stay there with him and help raise the 5 kids. So when he was 18, he left the farm and he went to St. Paul and lived with an Aunt Ida. He worked then as on the Burlington Railroad and was a fireman. His run was from St. Paul to La Crosse. My sister Harriet was born May 30th, 1914. I don't know the date, but Pa, as his duty, had to put the mail bag on a hook as the train was moving. He looked out to see where they were and was struck in the head with the hook. He was hurt very bad. He had a hole in the front of his head that was caved in. Mom said they could see his brains. They took him to Lutheran Hospital and put a cot in there for her and left him lay just like that for 5 days. Finally, old Dr. Gunderson said they had to do something because he was not dying. They never thought he would live. So they patched up his head, and he left the hospital. But they told him as he left the hospital, if you are doing all right, Elmer, after a year's time, you come back and we'll put a plate in your head. But he never went back. But he had a hole 1.5 inches deep and about the size of a silver dollar on the top of his head. He used to take my hand and run it across his forehead and say, you could just feel the little bones where they set it in. He never went back to work on the railroad again, and I can see why. Okay, they bought the Exchange Hotel on George Street. They ran that during World War I. Arlene was born there on February 8, 1916, and she passed away on September 18, 1916. She was 7 months old. Ma said she got some kind of a poisoning. The doctor called it cholera phantom or something. And it was from her blood not being good because she worked so hard at the hotel. She did all the cooking, did all the cleaning, and did everything. Harold was born at the hotel on December 1st, 1917. And then it was just a little time later, Pa went into the house moving business. We moved to 2138 George Street. I was born there on May 23rd, 1920. My Pa had 5 children in 8 years, from 1912 to 1920. Now, when we moved onto the house on George Street, 2138 George, that's when Pa went into the house moving business. And to move a house then, he had 2 horses at the hotel. They were called Tom and Jerry. He brought the horses with him, and it was called a capstan. It was in the middle of the street, and there's a cable attached to the 2 horses and to the capstan. They would walk around the capstan and pull the house. People or men working for Pa would have rollers, round timbers, like, and they'd have to keep putting them underneath the building on timbers as they moved. Well, he was moving this house one day and the cable broke and he hit a guy standing there watching him. Well, he had a perfect right to stand there, but it was hard for Pa. He was somehow disabled, I don't know what it was, but he sued Pa and he took our house away from us, and there was Pa. All of us kids and no house, he had nothing. So a man by the name of Ralph McKenzie knew Pa real well, so he talked to him. He said, I have a house. We'll saw the house in two. You move the half of the house to my lot and move half of the house to your lot. You don't have to pay me. And he wouldn't pay Pa for moving. So that's where our house went, 1914 Wood Street. And then Pa bought 3 lots there, so there was 2 other houses had to be built. And that's where our family lived, and the house is still there. And then Pa had a very good flourishing business. He did work for train company every week. There was 1 truck went to train company. Sent all the machinery for Northern Engraving and had a flourishing business. And before I got married and left home, he came home one day and he was so excited because he had this big Dun & Bradstreet book. And to be in that book, you had to have quite a bit of money. Way back then, now that had to be around 1940. I left home in 1943. And in there he was listed that he could borrow, and at that time, $50,000 with no problem. That's how his credit rating was. But he worked real hard. Pa would work 7 days a week, from 10 to 12 hours a day. He'd take us up into the Crooked Slough, they called it, on a Sunday morning for a picnic. Ma and us kids, and we'd go there and he'd go and unload a whole boxcar of coal in a day. He'd come to pick us up and he was as black as black could be. But he did it all one day, all by himself. They had no cranes, they had no anything to do it with, just a shovel and a wheelbarrow. And that's the way he got his money. He worked so hard. Now I know I'm saying a lot of things that probably just some people think, boy, she's for her father. Well, let me tell you, I was a baby, but Pa was to me more than a father. He was so good to me, and as I grew up, he would have given me the shirt off of his back. Anything I wanted, he would have given to me. And when he found out that he liked Ed, my husband, so well, and when he found out I was leaving to go to Chicago, he had bought me a car. It wasn't a real expensive one, but I had my own car. And I said, he didn't say, give me the money for the car or anything. I just sold it and went to Chicago. And he was so proud because, you know, I don't like to say things not nice to my sisters and brothers. But everyone, my sister and my 2 brothers, they all had to get married. It wasn't no planned wedding. It wasn't anything like my wedding. I mean, I had a big wedding. Pa came down, and Ma and Pa came, and Harold, my only brother, Gene didn't come. They all came to Chicago for the wedding. And it was a beautiful wedding. And then Pa would come down every now and then and visit me, Ma. But I had a lot of days when I was homesick because nothing like home. And should I quit now? I'm going to stop for a while till I get myself going again. This picture was taken at Ma and Pa's wedding, and if you'll notice, Ma's holding her flowers down. And she always told me, Eileen, that was the most unhappy day of my life. Her mother talked her into marrying my father because he had a lot of money. And they were a very poor family, but they had nothing. But Ma had gone with this fellow for years. They had gone together. And then she just up and left and got married to my father. A year later, or 2 years later, when they were in the hotel, one day there was a knock on the door. Ma went, and there stood that fellow, Ogden, his name was. And he says, Mabel, I hope you're happy. Well, my mother wasn't. But then he left, and that was the last of him. But that's what my mother always said. She was so unhappy, and that's why she's holding the flowers like that. Our family had many, many problems. Gene and Gert were the first to get married. Gert was only 15 years old. Gene was 19. And my dad was up in St. Peter collecting interest on the farm that he had inherited. So Ma went up to see Gert's mother. She wanted to talk to her, see if Gene couldn't stay home and she stay home till they could figure out what to do. They were both young. Mrs. Smith said absolutely no, she had to get out. So there was no choice but for Ma and Pa to take Gert in. So that's where she lived and had the baby. And they had babies every 2 years. Buzzy was 2 years younger than Phyllis. Phyllis was just a tiny thing. My mother used to go out and do housework because she had to have it to get money. Well, she would one time went out, was cleaning some house and come home, and she said to Gertrude, "How's the baby?" She says, "Fine, she hasn't cried all day." So Mom went and looked at her, and there Phyllis was in a convulsion. Well, my mother was so upset because, see, Gert being so young didn't know what she should do. And Phyllis, from that to the end, she had trouble, her eyes were crossed because, I said, from having the convulsions and being so weak, her eyes just crossed and they never straightened out. And then Gert had a friend across the street, Mrs. Maddie, which was not a good person. I guess I don't know how long Gert was, but she got pregnant. This woman knew the doctor to go to get an abortion. So Gert went to her to have the abortion, and the baby came. Well, Jean had to bury what was there, but it was, I don't know how old. I was pretty young at this time. I was 12 when they got buried. So I said Jean took what there was of it, probably a big glob, but it was enough so that they could tell it was a little girl. And he buried her right between Ma's house and their house. And I was thinking that. But of course, they had a lot of problems, no money, and young. I think that's about that story. I started to tell you at the last part of this thing that I thought Pa was so good to me, he'd give me anything. Well, he made out a will in 1941 or 2. I left home and I graduated from high school in 39. So it was before I went. My sister died in 1941 and I met Ed that same summer. Harriet died in July on Deacon's birthday, July 19th, Richard's birthday too. And then I said, about 3-4 weeks after that, I met Ed, a fellow that worked with me at Standard Oil, was stationed up at Camp McCoy with them. And used to always say, "I'm going to bring a fellow down for you to meet, Eileen." So one day he brought him down and that was it. We met and he kept coming down and we just kept seeing each other, and that's the way the ball bounces. We ended up being engaged. He came to Chicago and went with his mother and got a diamond, and I became engaged to Ed. And then it was right around that time my father made out a will, because Pa had a lot of problems. He had times in his life when he drank so terrible. Other times, like at my wedding, he wouldn't even have a glass of wine. He didn't drink anything. But I got a copy of the will, and in Pa's will, he had given the boys so many shares that he had incorporated that business, so there was 100 shares. He gave the boys each 33 shares, so they had 66, but he had the controlling shares, so that nothing could happen. He was still the boss. And then he gave me in the will to his daughter Eileen. I give her of the shares, 33 shares like I've already given to Harold and Jean. And any shares that are left over shall be divided equally between my 3 kids, Harold, Jean, and Eileen. Well, my brothers got all tooted up over that, because my oldest brother came up to me one day when I was up here visiting in La Crosse, looked me in the eye, and I wanted to slap him, but I didn't. He said, "You shouldn't have nothing of that business. Did you ever work for it?" And I says, "No." And then I wanted to say, "But did your daughters work for the share of the business they're getting?" No, they didn't do a damn thing. I took care of Pa's books up until the time I left there. He had no secretary. Once a month he'd sit down with me and say, "Let's make out bills, Eileen." So we sat down and I'd make out all his bills and did what had to be done. I never got paid, but Pa was so good to me. He'd give me everything. Just like down by the warehouse. Some spooky people and the lawyer should have been disbarred. If I would have went through, then he would have been. All of a sudden we went down there, they were going to sell a piece of property. Skip looked at me and he said, "What are you making a big fuss about? You don't know none of it." And I looked at him and he says, "Your dad gave that to your 2 brothers, and they even paid a gift tax on it." They say my dad gave that to them, and he'd been in the hospital 3 years, completely out of it. His mind was completely gone. Skip just took a piece of paper down there and said, "Elmer, sign this." He signed it, and it was giving the land away. And you guys don't need to think I'm that stupid. I went to a lawyer in Chicago, and he said, "That's a perfect case of fraud." He says, "I'll go up there and I will go for it." But he says, "I want to tell you ahead of time, whatever you get, I'll take 50%. So I thought, well, what's better, to have a little money or to have friendship? But I think I didn't have that good a friendship anyhow. They didn't seem to regard me of nothing. But I says, I never forgot it. And I hope Pa and Ma met both of them someplace and gave them a piece of their mind, because they would not be happy to have them think they could just beat me out of everything. But Harold and Jean, wherever you are, I hope you're happy. I am. I had a beautiful marriage. I met Ed. Nobody could have had a better husband than I had. He was a perfect husband, good to everybody, good to me. I never had to work. Nobody beat me up. Nothing ever happened between him and I. We had a perfect, love-enhanced marriage. And I'm sure that Jean, you and Harold, if you could go back and take your choice of the marriage I had or yours, you'd take mine. Yes, and going back to Logan High School, I graduated in '39. Gene had to quit when he was in his second year because Pa needed him to help him with the business. Harold graduated and Harriet graduated. And my sister in the lacrosse yearbook, they had all these different things. She was in a girls' course. There was about 7 or 8 of them, and she was in that book, as in this course. And so she did okay. Of course, she passed away when she was 27. They had 2 little girls, Patty and Mike. Patty died when she was 2.5 with leukemia, and 18 months later Harriet died. And it was a tough time, but we made it. And I see Mikey once in a while now, but Everett thought he'd put his shoes right underneath my bed. I'd be the mother for Mikey. And my dad said to me, don't you ever go out with him. I was 21 when Harriet passed away. So I never did. He was after me to go out, and I would never go. And I said, Everett married a woman he met on a train because he really wanted to find a mother for Mikey. And you figure that he had 2 little girls. Harriet died within 4 years of their marriage. So he had a rough life. Even though I didn't like him, he had a rough life. You could see why he turned to drinking. And that was that story with Harriet. Then in high school, when I was a senior in high school, Mary Nelson was the coach of the people that had acts like plays and things. And we had to try out for the class play. And me being Eileen, nobody ever thought I'd get a part. Well, I got the lead in the class play. This supposedly good friend of mine, but she wasn't really a good friend, was Margaret Lund. She got so angry because she didn't get no part. Anyhow, what was I going to talk about?
They named...
And then my dad, I can't remember when it was, but Deacon had a big, like a monument made up. Pa donated down by the boys and girls at the club in lacrosse. The athletic field for Swanson's for Logan High School. Pa donated all that land to them. So it is called Swanson's Field. And I said, that's a real wonderful thing because Pa would be so proud. I don't know what else. Modern Crane got started because Pa, with the business being divided up many years earlier, Harold and Jean and I, all 3 owned it together. But the nice attorney scamp, once again, when we were there talking about it, he looked at me and he says, I don't know why. He says, they can show they didn't make any money. Why don't you just get rid of it? I said, such a crook. I said, so I signed off and they gave me like $5,000 a year for 4 years. But that wasn't even the price of one crane. My father bought the first crane there ever was in lacrosse. And he had such a big business. All the franchises he had from the different companies he worked for. But that's okay. And then I said, Logan High School got that big piece of land down there and the other piece the boys took, which was wrong. But we had the family had a lot of problems, many, many problems, and maybe later I'll come back and pick out a few good stories. I think that's enough for today. When I was 7 years old, I want to tell you this story because there's many more. But Pa bought me a new pair of shoes. He always take me to Arms's and buy a good pair of shoes. And back then we only wore brown stockings because that's all they had. Well, I got a blister, never knew it, and didn't tell Ma, and evidently some of the dye from the sock went into that blister. It healed up, there was no mark on my foot, but did my foot hurt. Ma would soak it in hot water and I just cried, Ma, my foot hurts me so. Finally, one night I got sick to my stomach, so she said, you gotta go to the doctor. So we went to the doctor, old Dr. Smadall. We went there the next day. And he said to my mother, Mabel, why didn't you bring her sooner? I had blood poisoning, he cut it open and the stuff just shot out. But they took me, finally, he couldn't get it to get better. They took me to the hospital, took x-rays. They didn't even do that much then. Took x-rays and they could see there was 2 pus bags right at the base of my heel. So every day when I went every day to the doctor, he'd open that door, the nurse would, and I'd start to scream because it hurt so. He would take an instrument and stick it in that hole in my heel, but they never could hit those pus bags. Finally, he wasn't there, and old Dr. Wolf, he had a big beard. His name was Wolf, and he to me was a wolf, but he did a wonderful thing for me. He took a wooden stick, like a sucker stick, and he just put that in that hole, and he hit the pus bags, and my heel started to get better. Thank to him, because they were ready to cut my foot off. Every day I went to the doctor, even Sunday. I went to school the first day of school, and I went the last day. I missed the whole year of school. So I was always that 1 year behind my class. But finally I went the last day of school and everything cleared up, and I still have a lump in my heel that never went away.